All right, and hello everybody, and welcome to Busy Playing Something. My name is Sean, and I'm your host for today, and I am joined with Joshua LaRosa. Welcome back, Josh. How you've been?
I've been great. I've been good. I do feel like my backdrop makes me look like I'm, coming in from the corporate office, but I do have some representation of video game stuff here, so I am really a fan, believe it or not.
Believe it or not. And yes, it has been quite a while since we've had a Busy Playing Something show. It's been just over a year, I think it has, since our last one. We obviously had a large 2023 outside of everything that we're doing here. So now it's good to get back and start to talk a little bit more about the games that we've been playing and everything else that's been going on. So, Josh, I'll start. What's been going on with you lately? You've added another member to the family, right?
Yes, we had a baby, little Nathan, Nathan Drake. No, a little Nathan. Yeah, so me and my wife had a little boy last August, so that was partly one reason for the hiatus. But yeah, plenty been going on. You want to know something that's new that I hadn't told you yet?
Yeah.
Uh, I just quit my job today.
Ooh, quit your
Yeah,
job.
so yeah,
So,
I had.
so,
Oh,
so what's going there? You
mm,
won the lottery? Like, did you win the 100 million? Because I didn't think
yeah,
anybody grabbed that.
$100 million. You think I'd have a better backdrop if I did? No. So I accepted a new role elsewhere. So actually, I haven't technically formally handed in my resignation.
Ooh,
So it'd be
breaking
funny
news.
if. Can you imagine if it came out like this? Just somehow this got sent to somebody somewhere, and it's like, holy shit. But I had an informal chat with my boss, letting him know what's going on. But yeah, so that's going to be coming. I think once I get this contract sorted, I'll be able to do a George Costanza and walk in and go, I'm done, I'm out. But we'll see. But that's news with me. This literally happened 2:30 today. So
So
that
it's
was
still
fun.
fresh, still fresh.
Yeah. What about you? You got a house now?
Yeah, it might not seem like it, but yes, I am in new digs. Still setting it up at the moment, but I managed to scrounge enough money and not buy too many games. Relying a lot on Game Pass, I guess, but I've been able to buy my own place, and so I'm still setting things up. I've got a another room that we've just finishing off painting, so I might have either moving my computer in there, or I might have my drum kit and a couple of other things because I want to start getting back into making music. So I've got a few plans for it, but otherwise, you can see from my brand new bookcases, some of it's looking actually pretty good.
It's super exciting. I remember when we got our first place. It's like that, you always dream about having the games room, but then when you have a house, it's kind of like, well, any room could be a games room, right? And the way our house is designed, like we've got a pretty modern Hampton style home. So my wife's decorated and decked out 98% of the home, but I've got one room as you enter the house. It's like a little theater room that looks like it's like the one room you're like, this wasn't designed by the same person that did literally every other decision in the house. Like all our furniture is like white. We've got the white kitchen and the high roofs and all that. And I've just got like this black leather couch that has like blue neon lights and uh, a display case that's black steel, and it's like the boys' room. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's fun. It's fun. But this is the corporate office for me when I'm working from home. So I've got to be not careful, but it's always if I've got Power Rangers behind me, it's an interesting discussion. Like, would you want to sign up with someone that likes Power Rangers at 30 years old? I don't know.
Potentially.
Maybe. Yeah.
I'm still
Mm.
trying. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out my setup. Like I probably sound like ground control at the moment, because my microphone is still it's sitting there, but it doesn't quite sound right. So I'm trying to like finalize everything and get it right. But now that I might be moving the computer desk into the other room, I'm gonna have to do it all again. So there's a few expenses that I have to come along at some stage, and I'll hopefully have a nice setup because I do intend on getting back into streaming as well. I've actually got
Awesome.
the first game that I want to do, which I've got here on my Steam, and I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's called Buckshot Roulette.
No, no, I have
Oh,
not.
if anybody like watching has seen Buckshot Roulette, basically, you know how you have like Russian roulette where you've got
Mm.
the one bullet in the chamber sort of thing. So it's like that, except it's with a shotgun,
Right.
and you've got like different tools to kind of like stop your opponent or maybe you'll get rid of a bullet, like check, see what the next bullet is. Is it the live round or is it a fake round? Like, are you going to handcuff them so they can't have a turn, or like counter it or something like that? So there's a few different options. I'm interested to play that one. That
PC
sounds
only?
good. It is on PC at the moment. I'm not sure if it's on consoles, but I have a feeling it's a PC one. It's a very similar vibe to Inscription, if you played that.
Okay. Yep. Yes. Yes.
So very similar vibe. But anyway, this is our first show of 2024, and I know it's in May, so it's a little bit delayed. But as you can probably tell, we've had a lot of things going on, as we've said. Uh, Firstly, I want to say, Josh, what games have you been playing like this year, and I guess in the last year? Last year, obviously, I'm going to consider a little bit of a write-off, but at least this year,
Mm.
there's been a few new games that have come out. Which one has grabbed your eye?
Yeah, there's been a few, I'd say, major games that have stood out, I think, for this year. Some of those are surprises. I know Helldivers is one that you're playing, and that was a game I think nobody saw any real success in. It kind of, I played the first Helldivers back when it was on PS4 and Vita, and that was an isometrical kind of top-down shooter, and it still has a lot of the DNA that is in Helldivers 2, but I don't think anyone, including Sony, saw that game's success. So I put a bit of time into Helldivers 2. I have slowly moved on from that as other games have come out, but if I had to think of the two other games that are standing out to me right now, I think definitely Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I think I put over 90, close to 90 hours in the game, and I still have more to do. I just am saving that for another time. But yeah, that what a special game! Like I just Final Fantasy VII, the story of that, and the way that this game's being remade. I think it's one of a kind, right? You can't really remake another game in this style like that ever again, right? It's a once in a lifetime type thing. And then the other game, sorry, is Stellar Blade, which I've just finished a few days ago and
Yep.
had a really good time with. I think it's a really fun, uh, character action game. A little bit of Souls DNA in there, but I wouldn't call this game a Souls like. So, that genre can scare off a lot of people. So if you haven't played it and you're not necessarily the biggest Souls guy, I do think it's worth picking up. And seeing the physics happen in real time. What
The
about you?
physics, yes. Well, I was going to say, like, especially with Stellar Blade, that had a little bit of, a bit of a controversial vibe when it did come out, and especially even at the price point, we've got to think, like, here in Australia, when these brand new AAA games or even larger games come out, that's $125, which is a lot to pay
Yeah.
for a lot of these bigger ones. Like Helldivers, I know was about 60 or so. But
hmm
do you think that Stellar Blade as itself now it's still a fairly new game? Do you think it warrants that $125 price tag, or is it one of those ones where it's like, look, great game, wait until it falls a little bit cheaper?
I think in Australia, particularly, probably wait. I don't. It's funny. There's like certain games that will come out where I think the recommended retail for a PS5 game, dollar for dollar, technically is about 130, right? But I think you often find 99, $110. I think that's been the kind of max I've seen games genuinely come out around that range. But it was funny. Rise of the Ronin, which is another game I played this year, and Stellar Blade both were about $129, which was very expensive. And I think Stellar Blade's great. It might just be an Australian thing. We're not importing a lot of this particular game, and the costs are just higher for whatever reason. Because most big AAA games that come out, you can find sometimes for as low as say $99. So I think definitely wait. It's not like it's anything groundbreaking, but I do think it's genuinely a fun game. It kind of reminds me of a modern PS3 style of game. And I actually tweeted. Actually, let me bring this up because it got a funny response, and you might
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
find this interesting. So tell me if you find anything particularly disrespectful about what I'm about to say. This is a
Okay.
post on my X feed that you can find at Joshua LaRosa. Just a Stellar Blade appreciation post. The game feels like a modern PS3 game, a fantastic action game. Strongly recommend for those who are fans of the genre. Pretty, pretty fine, I would say. I don't think
Oh,
there's
is that it?
anything. Yeah, that's it. And this is the first response I got back. PS3 question mark. What a disrespectful. So how about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth? Is that PS3 vibe too?
What?
So this person's I'm not taking a dig, but this person's profile picture is Lily from Stellar Blade. So it's clearly this person is a massive fan of the series or of the game,
The game.
and didn't take too kindly for me calling it a PS3, giving me PS3 vibes, which I think it really does. It's kind of got that 20-25 hour action game, not quite open world, open area zone, but also quite linear. Like I think that's a fair thing to say. It's a modern PS3 game, but obviously I was being a bit disrespectful to this particular person. So
Funny that how like open world games now are becoming more and more prevalent, and then when a linear game comes where it kind of goes back to the PS3 era and that sort of thing, all of a sudden it's a negative. When I'm not sure about you, but I like my linear games because at least I know, yeah, it's probably going to be a little bit shorter than those open world games, but I'm gonna get a story that has the beginning, middle, end. It's got a reasonable length of time, like in terms of gameplay. They're the sort of vibes that we're getting. We're not talking graphics. We're not.
100%. And I wasn't saying anything negative. And that's the thing. There's a time and place for a Final Fantasy VII Rebirth where I spend 90 hours. But sometimes it's fine and fun to play a game that you can beat in 25 hours and move on. I don't think it's a negative. If anything, I see it as a positive. I think if this game was 50 hours, I would actually probably like it less.
Because it
Um,
drags on. Well, it might feel like it drags on a little bit, say.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know. People get offended pretty easily these days. So
Yeah, they do.
it is what it is. Mm.
But I will say that my pick of the year so far that I've put in a fair few hours into did get a little bit of controversy, and I did get a little bit offended by some of the changes that they were making. And that was Helldivers 2.
Mm.
So I love what Helldivers 2 has become, and I'm very happy to see more of these. I'm not going to say indie games, but definitely because it's published by Sony, so there's still that arm there. They've still been caressed, and they've been able to get onto that platform.
Rest.
Yeah,
Jim Ryan is out
yeah.
there, yeah, fumbling them, yeah.
He's don't say fumble. But they've been granted an opportunity to basically have not necessarily first party marketing, but their marketing strategy was very well done. And even like the advertisement, it runs as the intro video to the game every time you load it up. And it's a very clear and concise kind of, call to arms to get people to get involved.
Mm.
And so I'm happy that the game has done well and is still doing well.
12
However,
million units in
so I think it's the
weeks. I think it's best-selling PlayStation IP. It even surpassed God of War. Like, it's wild.
So it's racking up big numbers, right? And so what's the last thing you want to do when a game is becoming as successful as Helldivers 2 is in terms of its marketing, in terms of its player base, in terms of its hype? Well, of course, you turn around and you fuck over half of your players, especially those on PC, who have their keyboards and are ready
And
to
to
go
be fair,
online.
who cares about the PC players? Let's be real. No, I'm joking,
Yeah, you
joking.
are. Yeah, you are. Because yeah, when they came out and said, okay, well, we're going to have your PlayStation Network, your profile connected to it, or if you don't have one, sign up for one. Yes, they can hide behind security reasons, and oh yeah, we can ban people easier, and it helps. They can hide behind all of those reasons as much as they want, but at the end of the day, it's like you're opening up a pizza shop, and yep, anybody can order a pizza, and then 3 weeks into operation, you're like, okay, only if you know, earn this amount, you can continue to buy pizza here.
Mm,
Sort of like that's the vibes that I got, and a lot
mm,
of other people did because there's over 70 countries that cannot have a PlayStation Network account. It's banned,
yep.
and so those people who can buy and play Helldivers 2 now all of a sudden are stuck in that position where they can't play the game that they bought 3 weeks ago,
Yeah.
and so
Like,
that's the big disconnect for me.
100%. I agree. Look, I know that they initially launched with the PSN requirement being there technically, but they shut that off pretty quickly because the game did have some issues at launch. But yeah, selling the game in markets that you were planning to withdraw from because of the PSN requirement was definitely an interesting choice. And people did speak their minds like pretty quickly online, which resulted in Sony changing it. And it's funny, Sony don't do that too often. I can think of maybe one other time that jumps to mind, and that was when they were going to close the PS3 and Vita store, where the similar thing happened. Everyone kind of started screaming online, like, "Oh no, how am I going to play Infamous
This
2
this
Festival
one
of Blood or
this one
whatever?"
expansion from a 2008 game.
Yeah, yeah. What am I going to do? And then they came back and said, "Hey, look, we're sorry. We'll keep it online." And yeah, yeah. I think I tweeted something that was, I don't know if that was controversial, but I did say something along the lines of, because a product exists doesn't necessarily mean everyone would have the right to purchase it. And I do stand by that. But my only thing in this particular case is, well, you actually did sell it in this territory for a period of time. Um, so definitely an odd move. Definitely an odd move. And
Yeah.
I get Sony's perspective too. They want to be able to track monthly active users, and then that forms part of their MAUs when they're doing their financials. I get it, but this should have been clear day one, and the game shouldn't have been on sale in those territories if that was the case.
Well, that's the thing. They did spread their resources thin and allowed so many people to be able to play it. And then if they were pulling the rug out 3 weeks later, that kind of seems a bit disingenuous. And the fact that they actually came out about Ghost of Tsushima and said, oh yeah, we're going to be releasing it on Steam and all that sort of stuff. Oh, but you do have to sign in. Like they're telling you from the get-go, you have to sign into your PlayStation Network in order to be able to play I think it's the online. I don't think you need it for the single player. I'm not 100% sure on that. But I
Yeah, I
know
think you're right.
for one part of it you did, the other part you didn't. And I think Sony still are trying to figure out the PC market. They want to get their foot in the door. They've stated it before. They want to be able to tap into that market, and they have through the Epic Store and through other means. But they don't quite understand PC players, and they don't kind of understand almost the I'm not going to say like the market expectations, but they don't quite get that level yet. All they understand is if you want to play a PlayStation game, buy a PlayStation console.
Yeah,
But now they have to
100%.
shift their mindset. You want to buy a PlayStation game and play a PlayStation game, buy a PlayStation console, or jump through these hoops to play it on another platform, which totally fine. That's totally up to them. But iron that out first before you start doing it. Because
I think so.
imagine
Yeah.
we've got like Last of Us and Horizon and all these sorts of other games. They're releasing on PC. So what if they then go backlog? Pardon me, I'm choking. I'm getting choked up about this one.
Fired
Um,
up. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Well, what if they come back and say, okay, well, we released Days Gone on PC, but now you're gonna have to sign in with your PlayStation account.
Yeah, it's not right. It needs to be. It needs to. They need to set out the rules in which they want to play in day one. And I get to your point. They're still learning. And you're right with Ghost of Tsushima. I think it's the Legends multiplayer mode that you'll need the whole PSN thing. But I do also think the game is not being sold in regions without PSN regardless.
Yes.
So yeah, so they just need to iron out those edges, and it will take time. I think having a launcher or having some sort of sign up requirement isn't new. Ubisoft, EA, Microsoft do
They've
it,
all got them, yeah.
but just set the rules out day one because there isn't any rules, right? Games, Helldivers 2 launch day and date on PC. Uh, Horizon came a year later. We've got the original Last of Us Part One remake, but not the sequel, which actually technically came out before the remake of the first game. So
Well,
there's
we'll
no
get
clear
part
time
two
frame.
remake at some stage.
Yeah, yeah. So there's no clear time frame on when games are coming and how they're going to roll out and who's developing them too. So I think just Sony are clear. Like I listened to their financial call where they kind of talk through PC and their aggressive push into PC. So it's going to become more and more a thing. They just need to iron out exactly what that looks like and to set the message clear and straight day one. If you're purchasing a PlayStation game developed or published by Sony, you'll be required to have a PSN login.
And if they,
Fine.
yeah, if they came out and said that, I think that sets your expectations. And so you already know in advance as a PC player, if I'm part of these 73 odd countries or whatever it is that can't have a PlayStation Network account, I cannot play these games.
And that's fine.
That's
I think
fine.
that's fine. Yeah.
So be it. If that's the way that Sony want to work, so be it. But like, yeah, I agree. If you're setting those expectations early instead of pulling the rug out from underneath, I think that's going to be better serving for them in the long run.
And I do want to make it clear when I say that if they choose to sell it in or not to sell it in territories, that's fine. I do like as a human go, "Oh, that kind of sucks for players in that territory."
Yeah,
I'm just talking more of a business perspective. They have the right to do that. So if that's what they want to do, so be it. But I don't necessarily agree that you shouldn't be able to buy it. But
it's a
it's the
it's a
world we live in.
it's a shit take, but it's their take. So be it.
Exactly.
Um, Now we've spoken a bit about PlayStation, but
Mm.
I want to turn our attention to the big green X. So there was a few different changes that have happened to the Xbox brand and all that sort of stuff happening in the last couple of weeks, especially. And I reckon this is the perfect time to kind of have a little bit of a conversation. So just to put things in perspective, um, Microsoft announced about 1,900 different layoffs from a range of different developers. Some of them dissolved, others have been able to get other placements, but primarily not. Um, Not only that, they've actually announced a new development studio, Elsewhere Entertainment, to do triple to do AAA games. Okay, cool. So you're closing and then whatever. But anyway, this coupled with the fact that Redfall is now no longer going to be getting any updates after their big game update number 4, which will actually include offline single player, offline compatibility as well as single player pausing. Because you can't pause the game in single player. Like if you pause the game's still running because you're meant to be
Yeah.
always online. Now you're going to be able to have that. Who doesn't release a game like that? Anyway, whatever. So Xbox are making some very interesting choices. They were on a roll. That roll
Mm.
seems to have stopped. So
Hmm.
the question that we want to ask ourselves, and Josh, I do want to hear your thoughts on this one. If you were in charge of Xbox, if you were head of Xbox, taking over Phil Spencer, whether it's for a day or whatever, what sort of changes would you make? What sort of things would you do? How would you go about running the Xbox brand to make it successful?
100%. And I'll give a little bit of more context before I jump to it. So, like Sean mentioned, yeah, they had 1,900 layoffs earlier this year, and they were primarily around ABK. And then, so that happened. And then in between that, the rumors started to spiral out around Xbox games coming to PlayStation, and then every game imaginable was on the list and that was coming. So Microsoft held their emergency podcast with the three heads of Xbox to kind of set the record straight. And what resulted in that was four games coming to PlayStation and Switch in Hi-Fi Rush, Grounded, Pentiment, and what's the last one I'm missing? Grounded,
Sea of Thieves.
Sea of Thieves, of course. Sea of Thieves. How can I forget
Also,
Sea of Thieves?
Hi-Fi Rush. Geez, the rise and fall of that game in 12 months.
Yeah, exactly. So they announced that those four games were coming to PC, to PlayStation and Xbox and Nintendo.
Switch.
Jeez, Switch. So did that calm nerves? No, definitely didn't, because Microsoft, as they often do, would leave room for the idea that other games could come. They did say don't expect more games, but then they also went on to say, we're considering
All
everything. We'll
avenues.
kind of, yeah, we're considering all avenues. We'll see what happens. So that happened, and I was expecting at the time that those games would kind of come out maybe one a quarter to get us through to the end of this year. But they all came out within a month or two, right? All four games came to PlayStation and Nintendo Switch, which then made me go, that's weird. We must have more coming later this year. And I wasn't the only person to think that. And so that happened, right? Those games came. Fast forward to more recently, they announced the closure of four studios. Arcane Austin, obviously developers of Redfall, Tango Gameworks, Hi-Fi Rush, Mighty Doom developer Alpha Dog, and then Roundhouse Games. So the two that everyone seems to focus on is Arcane and Tango. Now, this gets to the first thing I would do if I was in charge of Xbox. I would stop talking because what is happening is people are able to go back because Xbox are a lot more vocal and they do a lot more interviews, and Phil Spencer's out on Twitter, and the other guys are all out there speaking. It's resulting in them having to come back to what they had said a month ago, and all of a sudden that not being true. And it's clear that Microsoft heads, in terms of Satya Nadella and others, are putting pressure on Xbox to bring games to other consoles. And it's clear that Matt Booty and Sarah Bond and Phil don't necessarily want to do that. They want to see the vision through that after they purchased ABK and ZeniMax and what that vision looks like. So the first thing I would be doing if I was, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts in this, is stop talking. Plain and simple. No more interviews, no more comments on things that can change rapidly. Sony and Nintendo rarely do speak, and when they do speak, it's usually to talk about games or a big announcement or a big change or something exciting. But constantly talking, constantly saying it's just these four games, saying things like Hi-Fi Rush met and exceeded all expectations, only to then close the studio a year later. Not necessarily a good look. So that would be the first thing, and I'll stop there. What are your thoughts on that?
So, I'm glad that you mentioned that both Sony and Nintendo only say things when there are things to say. And Xbox, we've said it before, even on this show, that they are playing catch up. And because they are playing catch up, they feel the need to keep telling people what they're doing so that way it sounds like they're accountable, it sounds like they're doing things, it sounds like they're making progress. At the end of the day, anybody with a mind on, what's happening in the gaming sphere knows that Xbox is doing things. We don't need to hear, every line of code that's being written. Obviously, is an exaggeration, but the fact that we know that they're working on Fable and all this sort of stuff in Elder Scrolls 6, we know it's all coming and all that sort of stuff, and that it's nice to let us know. Oh yeah, we're going to be working on this. You don't need to give us updates. You don't need to tell us, oh yeah, this is the direction we're going to do, because yeah, as you said, in a couple of months' time, that direction could change, and it's happened many a different time. Like we even go back to the Xbox One when that first came out, and even leading up to it about the secondhand games and the always on and all that sort of stuff. And then they had to
Mm,
quickly dial it back. Okay, that's for a new console. Fair enough. They wanted to go in a different direction. They got the fan feedback and they changed tact. Fair enough. Kudos to them. But now we're in a position where it's not even about getting fan feedback and changing. It's about, hey, look, this is really successful. We love what they've done. And then closing Tango. Just turning around
yep.
doing that. Which you'd think, okay, so why are we closing like a development team such as Tango? So not only did they release a sleeper hit for last year, which really helped and bumped Game Pass to an extent where you can almost find figures on it. I tried looking, I couldn't find anything, but there was talk about it. That's good enough for me. Um, but they released a game that was super successful that everybody loved, and then 12 months later, instead of, if you want to close Tango and move those staff into other development teams and beef them up, you're just saying, yep, no, we're doing layoffs. See you all later. Thanks for working with us. It it feels very businesslike and very kind of strict, especially
Mm,
when they say that Game Pass is meant to promote all these different creative ideas and that they're happy to listen to anything and try anything so that way we can get more different games. But this feels like such a safe move from them, closing these at Redfall 2 with Arcane, like closing these development teams and saying, oh yeah, we're going to focus on our big players, which everybody is going to know is like Elder Scrolls and Call of Duty and a couple
yeah.
of others. Like
Halo, Gears,
yeah, like
yeah.
we get that,
Mm,
but why give us hope that yep, we're going to go on this creative freedom of games
yes. Good
and
point.
then go, no, we're actually going to keep it structured, keep it simple. Similar to like Sony, we're not really going to deviate too far from the narrative. We're going to stay with safe. And, in 2 years' time, we might be talking about Gears, Halo, and Forza again. So,
Oh God.
but that's what it's starting to feel like. And so you kind of can't have it both ways. They're saying it both ways. If they were to
Yeah.
just stop, let's see what happens.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a lot of it goes back to ABK and that acquisition, right? You don't spend $70 billion and expect nothing to change. And it's clear that Jim Ryan, flying, what people call him flying crime, Jim Ryan, definitely did what he was set out to do and threw a complete spanner in the works. That deal was delayed by nearly 2 years by the time that it got done. And in that 2 years, a lot had changed and a lot had happened um, in terms of the gaming landscape and the way games are being made and how expensive games are to develop. So, yeah, I go back to your point around the creative freedom that Phil Spencer spoke about with smaller teams and congratulating Tango when they released Hi-Fi Rush and saying that we want to foster games of all scale, big and small, and have Game Pass really be the promoter for those things. And then in an internal memo, which again wasn't supposed to be made public, say, hey, we need to refocus on our big hits. So what does that mean? So, and a second example of that is we want to invest in, attack in Japan. You just close your only Japanese studio.
Yeah. Like what?
Make it make sense. So again, I think that the economics of Activision have fundamentally changed Microsoft's expectation of what Xbox needs to do, and that goes back to the games going multi-platform. There's the online scuttlebutt that has been somewhat debunked now that Microsoft were considering if they were going to put Call of Duty into Game Pass. How are you only having those discussions now?
Yeah.
How are you
Nah.
only now trying to figure out if it's doable or
But why
not?
are you even telling us? Like we all
Yeah, it was leaked, but
yeah, but
why?
that's the
Yeah,
thing. Let us talk about it. Let us say, oh yeah, Call of Duty could come to Game Pass. Like let us talk about the coulds and shoulds until we get a definitive answer. Because we don't want to get, oh yeah, like we're going to get the campaign on Game Pass, but multiplayer is going to be, you know, online only. You got to pay for that, and then a month later say, oh actually no, you got to pay for the campaign. Multiplayer is on Game Pass.
yeah. And I've long said you could literally go back 3, 4 years of me saying, "Is Game Pass sustainable?" And that conversation coming up, and then being debunked, and then I sit there on my corner saying, "No, I'm fighting back on what they're telling me. I don't believe it is." And fast forward 2024, that question, I think it is undeniably clear that that model is not working. And the push to multi-platform is to at least alleviate some of the pain of the sales that they're not getting by selling their games a la carte.
I,
Without ABK, their financials literally, not, I keep saying the word literally, it's not the right word, but would have been in the red if it wasn't for ABK. Game Pass subscriptions went up single digits, 1, 2, maybe 3%. I forget the exact number.
well,
And
they
that
don't
was in a
release them
year.
anymore. They don't release them anymore.
Yeah. And that was in a year where you had Redfall, fair enough, but you also had Starfield, which besides maybe some of the ABK stuff and maybe Halo is probably going to be their biggest pop, and Hi-Fi Rush, and you saw no growth in Game Pass. What does that tell you? To me, it tells me that people don't consume games the way that we do TVs and movies. People play, I think, a hardcore gamer, most of the hardcore gamers that aren't the very small minority, play maybe 1 to 2 games a month in terms of completion. Most people don't play a game for a bit, put it down, pick up another one, play a game. The style of TV and movies, the way that we watch TVs and movies is like that. You might pick up an episode, not like it, try another thing. People don't play games like that. So I think what's happening is they've kind of set themselves into motion where games need to come to Game Pass. They can't backtrack from that. And that's why when that Call of Duty discussion came up, I'm like, are you guys kidding me? Could you imagine if after all this you decide not to put Call of Duty into Game Pass?
So,
And then,
I'm going to stop you there for a second. It's starting to sound to me like you think Game Pass should go.
yeah, so, I don't. If I was running Xbox, I think you can't get out of it now. I think what I would do would be to rip the band-aid off. It is clear that Microsoft are putting pressure on these game on the team to bring games to other platforms, and it's clear that Phil and the team are trying to push back and do it very slowly. Hi-Fi Rush, Grounded and Sea of Thieves were amongst the top pre-orders on the PlayStation Store. Sea of Thieves in particular is doing extremely well.
Didn't they have like 9 out of the top 10, and the only one they didn't have was like Grand Theft Auto?
Yeah, it's wild. They were in the charts for PlayStation's top pre-orders. It was wild to see. So what does that tell you? You've got an audience in PlayStation and Nintendo that are conditioned to buy games. They don't have a subscription service where their new games come out to. So if I was in charge, and I think Phil knows this, ultimately it's coming. He's just trying to delay it as much as possible and control the narrative. This is the time where I would say you need to speak on this one thing, be honest, lay it out, rip the band-aid off. Are games coming day and date? If not, are they coming 12 months later? If that is the case, make it clear and let's move on. Because what is going to happen, we're going to have this Xbox showcase in June, and every piece of excitement that's going to be around every game, what do you think the first thing the journalist is going to ask?
Is it on Game Pass?
When's this game coming to PlayStation? Is this game
Ooh.
coming to PlayStation? That sucks the air out of the room. Where if they just come out and say, look, the landscape has shifted. We want to continue to support Game Pass and have our games launch day and date. To accommodate this, we will also be launching our games onto other platforms 12 months, 6 months, day and date, whatever that is. But we are doing it.
So, funnily enough, this is actually the number one point that I had in terms of what I would do if I was head of Xbox, is I would isolate the AAA games. You want to put emphasis on them. You want people to be talking about them, not only for them coming to Game Pass, but you want to be able to kind of stretch it out. You want to be able to move the units not only now, but in 3 months' time and 12 months' time. So what I wrote down was, day one on Game Pass Ultimate. And
Yeah, that could be.
the reason
Mm-hmm.
being, that's both console and PC. You're not
Yep.
picking just for PC. You're not picking just for console, because I think that if you want to get people onto Game Pass Ultimate, where they're paying that little bit extra, this day and date needs to move to that. Your regular Game Pass is still going to be there, and in 3 months after a game releases, so 3 months after Starfield releases, it comes out on regular Game Pass. So if you've just got it on console, yep, okay, cool, 3 months. So you've got 3 months to decide whether or not you want to go up to Ultimate. Otherwise, oh, that's all right. I know it's going to come in 3 months' time.
Yeah.
And
So
then,
maybe to your point, it's aligned to when the game launches on other platforms. So you can play it day one on Ultimate, free in quotes,
yep.
or in 6 months' time or in 3 months' time when this game launches on other platforms, it will now also be available in the lower tiers of Game Pass.
Well, yeah, and that's where I've got the third part is potential 1 year timed exclusive, and then release to other platforms. So, for example, Hi-Fi Rush now would be releasing on other platforms, which
Yeah.
is kind of where we're at. So that's what I think, because at least then you're not only got a potential driving factor to Ultimate, you're giving it a little bit of prestige. You want to play games day and date, day one, AAA
Free.
games for effectively free. If it's a subscription you haven't forgotten to stop paying, then Game Pass Ultimate, perfect. And in 3 months' time, you get the more casual players. Oh, on console or on PC. So taking away PC from it, the console one, this is probably where most people are going to have it, because if they've only got one platform, if they don't have console and PC, they've got console, they're just going to have this general Game Pass. So yep, they may not get it, day and date, but they're getting it 3 months later. And so you get another quick little hit. Oh, okay, well, if I pay for the subscription service, yeah, I'm going to get this game day and date on this console Game Pass, plus everything else that's on offer. And then a year later, you can say, all right, we've got our Game Pass. We know it's going to stay on Game Pass. Now let's go PlayStation. Now let's go Switch. Now let's go to the other platforms. And then you're bringing them in. And then they may say, oh, well, Hi-Fi Rush was fantastic. You mean I could have played this 12 months ago if I got Game Pass Ultimate? Or even 9 months ago if I got it on Game Pass? Well then, what's the next big game that's coming out?
Yeah, and I have to wait. I know Hi-Fi Rush won't get a sequel, but when the sequel comes out to
Yeah.
one of these games that have come to other consoles, I can play it now, or am I going to wait 12 months to get it on my
Another
platform?
12 months.
Yeah, another 12 months from when that game launches. And the thing is that the devil's advocate to this point is, and this is something a lot of Xbox fans will come out and say, is But why buy an Xbox? How is this going to help console sales and how is this? It's not.
No.
It's never going to. 99% of the fan base don't know that Arcane Austin are owned by Xbox. Let alone do they even know who Arcane Austin is or the name of the studio that makes their favorite games. They
Or
just see the
Tango.
game or Tango. They see the game and play the game.
Yeah, who made Grounded,
That
by the way?
Obsidian. Like
Yeah,
we know,
yeah, we
but
know.
like
Who knows Obsidian besides
yeah,
us?
yeah. That's the thing, right? There's probably key studios like Naughty Dog or things where people know the name and it's like I'm buying a Naughty Dog game, but most people don't. And when you gobble up two third-party platforms in Bethesda, ZeniMax, and ABK, and think the economics of the way you make games isn't going to change, it always is. So when I go back to, okay, what about the hardware, right? Is this going to kill the console? Are they going to make another console? Am I going to lose all the games that I've purchased on my 360, Xbox One, Xbox Series? I get the fear because if I was an Xbox primary player, I would be feeling the same thing. What I think we need to understand and get over is the fact that none of what has happened in terms of these major acquisitions has moved the needle at all in their direction. People are set. People have established that PlayStation, Nintendo, and PC are the major platforms. They're not going to move across. There's not going to be a game. Maybe Call of Duty would have been that, but economically you couldn't make that exclusive, and legally you can't now as well. There isn't going to be a game that is going to. Indiana Jones isn't going to make someone that has a PlayStation buy an Xbox. People are set in their ways. They've got a library of games that they've purchased. They're not going to just drop that to start fresh to play Indiana Jones. So you need to go to where you need to go to the screen where gamers are playing, and that's what Microsoft always talk about. You know, every screen's an Xbox. So what does it mean for console? It means there isn't a console. I think if you hear the way that Phil Spencer and Sarah Bond in particular talk about it, they keep saying hardware and not console. And the reason for that, I think, in my eyes, is I don't know if Xbox maybe they've got one more generation in them, but beyond next gen, I don't know if they're going to have a console. I think they may have hardware that plays their games, whether that's a handheld that's got Game Pass or a box that sits under your TV that's got Game Pass, but it isn't a competition to the PlayStation. It's just another way to play your games. Just like a Rogue Ally is another way to play your games. Like a Steam Deck's another way to play your PC games. So your library will still exist. Game Pass will still exist. Will the console sales for series consoles plummet? I don't necessarily think they will any more than they are already. They were down 30% year on year. And that was on a year they were already down nearly 30%. It's happening. People aren't purchasing Xboxes. The hardcore will support the platform and will buy the hardware regardless. There isn't going to be a major. All those people aren't going to drop their. Like I said, people won't transfer to Xbox for Indiana Jones. People who have an established library of games on Xbox aren't going to jump ship for PlayStation if they can continue to support Xbox. So what does that mean? It means your hardware becomes a lot more niche. Does that matter? No. Where's the money? In the software. Where's the software? On your PC, on your PlayStation, on your Switch 2, on your Xbox handheld.
You know, it's starting to sound like your third point, if you're in charge of Xbox, is to cut the Xbox line.
I think so. I would maybe have one more generation because I think they've already kind of committed to it. But I wouldn't be doing it. Why?
So you go pure software.
I would still have some sort of device. Whether it's a box that plugs into your TV or just a handheld, have something. Give players the option because at the end of the day, Game Pass only exists on PC or the Xbox hardware. So I would still
Or
have an option.
Samsung TVs.
Or Samsung TVs, right? But maybe you have just the handheld that docks into the TV and that's the system. That's it. It's not as powerful as a PlayStation, but you have access to Game Pass and all your previous games under the Xbox library. Does that suck for hardcore Xbox players? Yes. But you still have a choice. You still have hardware to support. You still can play those games. It just means the economics of the way that the console is sold and distributed is completely different. But that's what's coming.
For a brick and mortar store, which obviously their sales are a lot less than what they were 10 years ago. I'll tell you that. That almost makes Xbox obsolete in a sense. You're only going to have PlayStation, Nintendo posters and game sections and all that sort of stuff. It doesn't sound like there's going to be any sort of, especially if you don't have physical based media. Like if you go to any sort of EB Games, they might have one or two PC games and there'll be digital codes. They won't be
That's happening
discs.
now. Hellblade's not launching physically. Like that's what I mean. That's what I was talking about. The
Yeah.
half steps. They're already there. Rip the band-aid off. Make it clear we are still committed to hardware. We're still making games. The hardware is dipping regardless. Xbox will make much more money and be more vibrant by selling their games everywhere. I mean, is Sea of Thieves a game that launched what 10 years ago nearly on Xbox One? Like
Or maybe
it's
not 10,
old,
but
right?
yeah, it's you're getting there.
Maybe not 10, but it's getting there, right? If that game's outselling Stellar Blade, which just launched as a PlayStation exclusive, and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, that tells you people will play and buy these games. They're just not switching platforms to do it. So meet people where they play. That would be what I'd do.
And I think also you did touch on it already. A lot of Xbox people, like whether take away Game Pass. So if you're kind of like a legacy person, like myself for example, you've had the Xbox games with Gold, and if you've been adding those games, every month or whatever it is, that's 4 games effectively on and on a month. I've got a selection of over 200 games there. Most of them now are on Game Pass, which funnily enough, yeah, fair enough. But you've got Game Pass, you've got these other digital games that you've already committed to. Like my library is, yeah, we're touching on nearly 500 games,
Yeah,
and I own maybe 3 physical games.
that that's the point, right? And that's the reality of it. People who are subscribed to Game Pass aren't also buying these games anyway. So as long as they've got a way to continue to subscribe to Game Pass, like no one's buying Halo Infinite as well as being a Game Pass subscriber. They subscribe the games there. So really, what Game Pass has been around since 2018.
Yeah,
Most hardcore Xbox fans that have been on Game Pass haven't probably purchased a first party game in a long time. Third party, yes, that's where it gets a bit tricky, right? Because
yeah,
if the hardware changes and becomes just a Game Pass machine, games that aren't launching on Game Pass that are third party, you have to play on your PC or you need a PlayStation. But at the end of the day, Microsoft don't make money on those games. They make money on their own games. And they own ZeniMax and ABK, which is a big piece of the pie.
yeah. Well, okay. So I'm gonna kind of touch on that a little bit. This is another thing that I would do if I was in charge, and it's something that they've also worked towards, but it's a little bit left of field, and I'm not sure if you would have thought of this. Um, so in the month of May, there's about 20 to 25 games on Game Pass that are going to have access to mouse and keyboard updated to those games. I think that's the way that you need to go. Whether you're dwindling the console or whether you're trying to make it more accessible, if you've got more of these games available on console with mouse and keyboard, so maybe not necessarily your online games, I think that there should be an option for that, but at least your single player games, like The Witcher and that sort of thing, if you've got mouse and keyboard support, I think that's going to help people, especially if they've got a TV and they don't have a PC, they might have like a little shitty laptop or something like that. They might still buy that box because that's the best way to be able to play their Game Pass games and they can have a keyboard and mouse. Yes, you're turning
Yep.
into a glorified computer, but we've seen
That's
before
what consoles are.
welcome to consoles, baby. That's
Yeah.
literally what they are. And I think if you're going to try and tap into a market that isn't necessarily hardware in terms of like the actual box that plays the games, at least look into all the other hardware. Yeah, your headphones and all that sort of stuff, but the way that you play a game is important. And for a lot of people, they won't touch console because of the controller. For other people, when you play Super Meat Boy on PC, you're going to have to play with a controller because that's the best way to play it. And
And what you said is hitting the nail on the head. PC players are not buying consoles and will not move to a console regardless if it's an Xbox or a PlayStation. That's why PlayStations are bringing games to PC because
yeah,
it's like the console market isn't growing, right? There's the same 300 million players between PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo, and those numbers shift between the three. That's it. PC players are set. Just like I'm a console gamer and will not play on PC because I'm set in my ways and I'm happy being a console gamer, and those PC gamers are doing the exact same
But
thing.
if you had
So
a keyboard
go
and
to them.
mouse, if you had a keyboard and mouse that you could use on your PlayStation, would you consider using it?
No, I wouldn't.
Yeah,
I wouldn't.
you
But some
wouldn't.
people
You
would.
wouldn't. But that's because you're a controller player. If you're going to play a
Yeah,
game on PC, would you use a controller or keyboard and mouse?
I use controller.
There you go.
But
So you're
you
after
got
that
the option.
yeah, but you're
Yeah.
after that controller support. And so I think if you're trying to be smart and sell an Xbox and say, "Yep, this is the best way to play the game if you don't have a PC," give them that option of keyboard and mouse. I think you're going to get people to not necessarily convert over, but they're going to look at that as an option. And for people, and we're not just talking about, us with our large, gaming lounge rooms. You've got people in Japan, for example, the Switch goes bonkers over there because they don't have the space. They don't have the space for a PC. They might for a laptop, but otherwise they're going to have a little TV in the corner. If you can say, okay, well, if you put a tiny little box on that, you can use your keyboard and mouse and play Valorant. Why
I
buy a
mean,
PC for three times as much?
exactly. And if Xbox can get to a point where Game Pass becomes the model and streaming becomes to a point where it's doable for most people, imagine having a handheld where you could just launch a game instantly. I want to start playing this. I want to stream it. Oh, I do like it. Okay, maybe I will download it natively. That's the future. Like that's what I don't think people want to come to the realization to. And I'm like, it's not a bad thing. This is like this Game Pass made sense in 2018. They needed to do something that was different to what PlayStation was doing because they were getting beaten in every metric. The world's changed so much since then that the economics of it doesn't make sense. This is their best chance to really become a dominating force. Having your games everywhere, having Microsoft Gaming or Xbox, whatever they want to call it, splashed over everything, and selling on PlayStation. Who cares? It's the same with Windows, right? Like that they don't go, Asus, we're not gonna, no, we don't actually want you guys to have Microsoft Office. No, Microsoft Office is available on Windows laptops, but it's also available on every other laptop, regardless of who made it. And that's what Satya is trying to do with Xbox games. And Phil, Matt, and Sarah are pushing back on it. But I think everyone has a boss. You're not gonna convince the CEO of Microsoft that what little old Phil Spencer thinks is the right way to go after they they get ABK. Because what happens? They buy ABK. What's the first thing they do? Holy shit! Call of Duty makes how much? How much is this game selling on PlayStation? We're missing out on how much? Why are we doing it?
Yeah, I think the biggest win that Xbox could possibly have, and they've already got it in a sense, is when you load up a game on PlayStation and it splashes with Microsoft's Game Studios.
And it costs them $70 or the equivalent
Yeah,
to buy it,
you've
where
got
you get
that.
it for
You've
free.
got that for Sea of Thieves. You got that for Grounded. When you start getting that for your Call of Duty, when you start getting that for your Elder Scrolls, when you start getting it for your Diablo, this is where it's like, okay, this is where the money's going because now I'm playing on a PlayStation, but I still see Microsoft and Xbox.
Exactly. And if they've got a device, again, not a console, they have a device that's reasonably cheap, that, all right, fine. I can just buy this handheld that I can connect to my TV and it's got Game Pass. Man, that's only the cost of 3 games that are made by them that I would buy every year.
Oh yeah, paid $80 for Sea of Thieves, or you know,
Yeah.
I now have it available at any time on a handheld
And let's be real. Josh is playing Hellblade 2. What is he doing? I'm subscribing for a month and then I'm subscribing.
until
And
you're
that is what
beating it.
most people are doing.
Yeah,
That's
my
why
my dad
subscribers
does it
haven't
as
gone up.
well. Like his Christmas presents are literally like 3 1 month Game Pass things because I
Yeah,
know he's going to use it a month at a time. If there's a new Call of Duty or whatever, he'll use it. If there's a new Halo, he'll use it. If there's a new when Gears 6 comes out, yep, he's going to use it for a month and play that. He's not going to be subscribed for 12 months. He's not like me who sits around games all the time. And
exactly.
that's the audience that Microsoft is targeting. They're targeting the people who aren't full-time Xbox players. They are part-time Xbox players or
People
casual
like
Xbox
people like
players.
me and you probably make up 20 million of the 200 million console players. People like us.
Yeah,
The rest of them, they buy Call of Duty every year. They
and
play FIFA,
FIFA.
they play Madden, and they do all that. So if I'm one of those people, I play Call of Duty. Say I play Call of Duty and FIFA. That's $150, right? Don't worry about FIFA because Call of Duty is the Microsoft game.
You mean EA Sports FC?
EA Sports FC. Does it make sense for me to pay $70 to buy that game or subscribe for $15 a month?
By the
If
way, you
I'm
mean
just playing
70
that one,
US, yeah? Australian
I'm
dollars,
speaking.
we're talking 120.
We're talking about $300 here. No, financially it makes sense to just buy. If I'm only playing that one game, it's actually cheaper for me to just buy it than it is to say subbed for a year. If that's the only game I'm playing,
But if you're paying
is
that and you're playing, say, I don't know, Halo,
yeah, that's what I mean. If you're a person that plays multiple games, well then there's consideration. But for the majority of people who just buy Call of Duty and that's it doesn't make sense. So offer it to those who are in Game Pass, but make some mega bucks by selling it everywhere. And at the end of the day, Minecraft's everywhere. Call of Duty legally has to be everywhere. Like they're already doing it. And Sony's going to bring their games to PC. They'll probably move to a day and date for all their multiplayer games, I would suspect, in the next 12 months. Right? They're looking at Helldivers and going, holy shit. 6, 7 million of the 12 millions were purchased on PC. We could sell how many copies of whatever? I do still think they'll scatter their single player stuff and do a year later because that's working too, right? Ghost of Tsushima's like concurrent players is massive, and that's a single player game that launched 4 years ago. So that is working. Like the landscape is changing. If you had asked me during the PS3 generation, would Sony games come to PC? I'd say no. And at the end of the day, Bungie, Marathon's on Xbox. MLB The Show's on Xbox. Like it's the world is changed. And I know Sony, if they had the choice, they probably wouldn't have had those games on Xbox. But the reality is they do. And Microsoft, the reality is they have games on PlayStation already. So let's just rip the Band-Aid off, be clear, and don't waver from it.
all right. So that's what we'd do if we were in charge of Xbox and could make any changes. But we are going to waver a little bit. We're going to change
Mm.
to a couple of other smaller little things to talk about before we do wrap up the show. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was Assassin's Creed Shadows.
Yes.
Now, this one was announced. Now, Josh, I want to ask you a question.
Mm.
What's the controversy around this game? Because I don't actually get it.
Okay, so it's not just me. I am confused. Are people angry because there is a African main character that's set in Japan and not a Japanese like focused protagonist, even though it's a split? I've seen both sides. I've seen people online saying, "Why is there a black guy in my Japanese Assassin's Creed game?"
Yeah,
And then I've seen the other side of the coin being, "Why am I not playing as a Japanese person in a Japanese set Assassin's Creed game?"
yeah.
And to people on both sides, what are we whinging about here? There is two playable main characters, one of which is a Japanese native that you could play. The other option is a person who actually existed. What is the issue here? I actually don't know. I've read both sides of it, and I'm like, okay, so what I thought was the issue isn't the actual issue. It's the actual Japanese representation in a Japanese set game. And then I read something else saying, no, they're just angry because it's a black dude. I'm like, come on.
Yeah,
What are we actually at?
it's anti woke racist people basically. Because I think it's Yasume. So he came over from Africa.
Yasuke? Yasuke?
Yeah, Yasume, one of the two. I've forgotten the name already. But he was actually a samurai in the 1500s, and so he came over from Africa, and he's a whole part of like the history. He was the first, black samurai, and
Awesome.
so there's like this whole thing about that. And so the fact that you can either choose to be him, who's an absolute brute of a samurai, or you play as like effectively a female ninja
Assassin. Yeah.
assassin. Now, I think the controversy around that is the fact that A, you're playing as a black guy, or B, you're playing as a woman. Where's the straight white
Man.
men?
In every other video game. Like, come on. I reckon it's awesome. I think the idea of like a black samurai, he's like visibly bigger than most of the other people. Like it's such a cool concept, right? You can play as this tank that basically is, in this world and is visibly much taller than a lot of the other characters, and he's just this brute. I think that's awesome. And then you could play as the titular assassin character as well. I haven't played an Assassin's Creed game. No, I lie. I haven't been excited for an Assassin's Creed game since maybe Black Flag. I
Yeah,
was like,
don't get your hopes
I'm
up,
playing.
bro.
Yeah, I'm playing this day one, aren't I? Yeah, I think I am. Like,
Black
I think
Black
it
Flag's still
did the
pinnacle.
job. Yeah, and it did its job. Like, I've fallen out of Assassin's Creed pretty vocally, and I'm excited for this. This is the first one where I'm like, in a while, where I'm like, yeah, I'm going to play this day one. So, I mean, it seems to be pre-ordering quite well, and again, I think people just like to complain. It's like the Stellar Blade thing we spoke about before. It's like everyone just has to have an issue with something
I think
because
I think at the end of the day, people are going to cry woke because it's easy for them to be able to do that.
mm,
But also, like this still doesn't shade away from the fact that the people in charge at Ubisoft still did terrible HR related things to their staff over a long period of time, and the fact that their last, sorry, quadruple A game. When did that actually release?
I don't know. All I know is it was announced like 50 years ago.
Yeah, late last year. See, Skull and Bones, which then came out early this year to
Yeah, Feb,
zero
didn't it?
fanfare. Notice how
Yeah.
they haven't even been talking about it
Mm.
because they realized that it bombed. Because they realized, oh, everybody liked the ship elements of Black Flag. Let's do a game on that. And then everyone's like, no, that's not what we liked. We liked the whole package. We like being
And
a
even if
pirate.
and even if we did, that was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
We've moved on.
Oh, it's
We've
over
moved
10
on.
years ago. But Black Flag was 2012, 2013. But yeah, we're 2024, by the way. So,
Yeah.
look, I did pre-order Assassin's Creed Shadows, mostly so I can get the statue and add it to the collection at the back there. I am looking forward to it, though.
Yeah.
I don't know too much about what the plot will be or anything like that. I know where it's situated. I know everyone's going to compare it to Ghost of Tsushima. Like that's going to be a given. But at the end of the day, I actually really enjoyed Mirage. I liked how it was a shorter game than your Origins, your Odyssey, your Valhalla. You were able to kind of like think I finished it in about 25 hours to 35 hours, something like that,
Perfect.
with
Perfect.
some collectibles and stuff. Um, that's what I'm after, and
Mm.
I
And this
feel
is the
like this is on
Odyssey
that.
team, right? This is the Odyssey team. I think they've said the map is comparable to Origins, which is
Yep.
the smallest out of those big, massive ones. So I still think this will be the big 50, 60 hour Assassin's Creed game, but I'm just
Yeah.
hoping it's kind of like between Mirage and say Origins and not Valhalla where it's like 150 hours and you're still running around that map.
Well,
Um,
I'm still playing Odyssey occasionally here and there, and I keep forgetting how to do the combat because I forget to dodge roll. But Assassin's Creed Mirage took me 32 hours
yeah, that's
to finish,
perfect.
which
Perfect.
is it's exactly what I wanted from like an Assassin's Creed game.
And that's
So
what Assassin's Creed games used to be. Like two and even or two was even shorter than that. I think it was like 20, 25 hours, and they were
yeah, two
perfect.
Brotherhood, Revelations, three was around
Love
about that
those
length.
games.
Black Flag was longer, but that's only because of the amount of collectibles. But the thing is, it was enjoyable, and Ubisoft took that and said, "Oh, you like long collectibles? Let's
Mm.
do collectathons." When people just enjoyed the area, like it got to a bit of a drain at the end of it, but yeah, they missed it there.
And it was
So
also like PS4. It was like, oh, this is interesting. Look how
Wii
big
U,
we can. Yeah, look how big we can make our worlds now. Where now
yeah,
it's like that's more of a turn off than an attractor to the game. To be
yeah,
honest, I rather have. I like games that have got implied openness. Like
yeah.
Final Fantasy is a perfect example of that, where it's open world, but it's kind of not.
Actually, Ratchet and Clank's one of mine.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
feels like there is a world, but it's very linear.
That's what I personally like.
Um, Another thing that I wanted to bring up, another topic, is about Square Enix. So this is very similar to kind of what we were talking about regarding Xbox and PlayStation and what their strategies are with their games, not only their AAA games, but everything else. So Square Enix have shifted tact due to lowering of sales, and they are now looking at aggressively moving towards a multiple or multi-platform strategy. Now, I'm not sure about you, but it sounds like a lot of Square Enix's big games recently have been Final Fantasy, and I think there was like a Dragon Quest thrown in there. So, do you think we're going to see Final Fantasy 7 on Xbox? What does this actually mean in your eyes?
And I want this to be taken not as a PlayStation fanboy thing. Just hear me out. Firstly, Final Fantasy VII won't. I think Sony negotiated post remake because remember that game was only supposed to be exclusive to PlayStation for a
For
year.
1 year, yeah. How many
Yeah,
years ago?
and it uh four 2020, I think. Yeah, remake was 2020. Um, so I think they locked the 7 trilogy with PlayStation. 16 though, maybe. But this is what I think this really means. So they talk about HD games, and what they mean by that is everything that isn't mobile. Now, Square Enix have released, if you look at the games Square Enix have released over the last 2-3 years, ridiculous. They had games launching on top of each other. Deerfield Chronicles and Valkyrie Elysium were launching weeks apart. It was wild. They had games everywhere. For Spoken, what's the bubble game called? Foam Stars. They had like just games that you'd be like, what the hell's going on? So what I think this means is they're kind of looking at what Capcom have done and what's made them successful. So they've dialed back on the volume and focused on quality. They're bringing their teams more in-house and working and cross-functionally in terms of, what we learned on this game, we can apply to this game, as opposed to them being very separate teams and sometimes having to learn the same thing twice because they're separate. What this means for bringing games to other platforms, though, this is what I think realistically this will mean. And I'm sorry, Xbox fans. What this will mean, because both Switch and PlayStation have had their exclusives. And remember, HD games refers to everything that isn't mobile. So a game like Live Alive or Octopath Traveler counts as what they're talking about. They do specifically call out Final Fantasy VII Rebirth sales, though, which is, of course, a PlayStation exclusive. So what I think is happening and has happened. Sony negotiated the remake trilogy exclusivity years ago, right? Maybe during the year between the game's launch, so say between 20 and 2021. Square Enix got a bag of money. Perhaps they got a bag of money then for all 3 games. So when the game's now launched 4 years later, it's only selling on PS5, therefore the sales are lower than what they could have been. What I think they're going to do, realistically, is look to launch their games on console and PC day and date. And where possible, go multi-platform. But if I am Square Enix, realistically, and Final Fantasy 17 is in development, and Sony comes to you with a bag of money and says, hey, we get it. We're bringing our games to PC. We get it. But we want console exclusivity. Unless the Switch 2 can handle the game, well, then Square will probably say no and probably push back on it. But say we are in a world where Final Fantasy 17 comes out, PS6 and whatever the new Xbox is, and Switch 2. Switch 2 is rumored to be as powerful as, say, a PS4. Say 17 can't run on Switch. So that leaves you PC, PS6, and whatever the Xbox Series X2, whatever. If Xbox hardware continues on the trajectory that it's on, if Sony went and said, hey, we just want console exclusivity, we've got, say we're looking at it today, 60 million PS5s and 25 million Xboxes. If we pay you to cover what you could have sold on Xbox, where's the loss in that? So I think ultimately what this will mean is they will be a lot more multi-platform in terms of launching their games on console and PC at the same time. The Xbox player will be, Josh, they literally said Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo on their press release, right? They have to say that. They're not going to just exclude Xbox. But realistically, what I think will happen, Sony will still try to get Final Fantasy as a console exclusive. But where possible, these games will be launching PC day and date. And perhaps we do see games come to Xbox later. That's my read on it. Because I don't think Sony are going to back down. They've got such a strong relationship with Square Enix. And I think if Sony's giving them a deal and saying, hey, we're going to give you a bag of money to cover the sales, and we're going to do your marketing, and we're going to give you a better split on the PlayStation Store, and we own 70% of the console market share between Xbox and PlayStation, even more, right? I think the number was 5 times to 1 in terms of sales of hardware this year between Xbox and PlayStation. I don't think they're going to say no to that. But this is good news for an Xbox player. I think this gives a bit more life to the platform in terms of at least the chance for some of these games to come across. And you might see in the short term some of these older games that perhaps are PlayStation exclusive or Nintendo exclusive come everywhere, except for Final Fantasy VII. But you might see 16. But what this will mean in the long run, I still see console exclusivity with PC day and date being a thing.
Okay, so
That's just me.
it kind of sounds like you also think that whether it's their AAA games or their larger games, whether it's series or whatever or titles, will be potentially bought into by PlayStation, but
Or Nintendo.
or Nintendo. But the smaller ones, like for example your Octopath Travelers and that sort of stuff, they're more likely to go like for example for Spoken could go Xbox.
Yeah. Yeah. And part of the restructure, what they want to do is kind of make less of those style things and kind of focus on Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Kingdom Hearts, like the stuff that's going to make money. And
Well, Kingdom
it just
Hearts would
be
have to go
interesting.
both.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? I think it's going to be on a case by case basis, and I really do hope more games go to Xbox because I think everyone should be playing Final Fantasy. It's Final Fantasy. I know seven's not coming, but those games in particular are like some of my favorites, and 16's fantastic. But those games need to be coming to PC day and date as well, and I think Sony know that as well because they're doing it themselves. They're seeing the numbers, so I would suspect that would be the case. Um, But I don't know. If we're being real here, and hardware continues to dwindle on Xbox, if Sony does come to you with a bag of money and be like, "Fine, you can release on PC day and date, but we want this for a year," what do you do?
You're probably going to cop
What
it, really.
you're gonna? Yeah, Square Enix will be like, "All right, we'll take the bag, but we're coming to PC."
Yeah, and that's an interesting one as well because on the flip side, if you had say an Xbox throw a huge bag of money, do you reckon that's going to be something that's going to sway Square Enix to say, okay, well we'll release it, timed exclusive for a year and then go to PlayStation, or do you feel like the relationship between PlayStation and Nintendo and Square Enix is a little bit too tight for Microsoft to get their foot in the door because Microsoft do want to try and get into that Japanese market as much as they are also pulling out of it. So, like, is that kind of a move for Microsoft, or do you think that's kind of off the table?
I think it's off the table for the fact that this is one of the negatives of Game Pass. If a game isn't launching into the service on Xbox, it's not selling as well as it should necessarily be selling. So, like, a game will be announced for Xbox. I forget there's this third person shooter. It's like a small soldiers kind of multiplayer
Toy
shooter
Soldiers or
exclusive.
something?
I forget what it's called, but it's coming
Yeah.
to Xbox. And the developer of one of the heads of the studio had to do this plea online where a lot of the comments was this game's going to be dead on arrival because it's not launching on Game Pass. And he's basically pleading for those players to try the game and buy games and support developers. So that's the thing. So Microsoft need to come with the bag for the money for the sales that they're potentially going to lose out on PlayStation, plus give them the Game Pass bag. So it's a lot of money where I don't think Sony really need to negotiate that hard, right? They're like, well, your games do sell on here. and you're not really going to sell that many copies over there, and we're going to give you the money for them anyway, and we'll do your marketing, and you'll be a big part of the PlayStation showcase, and you get your games to PC. Fine, fair enough. So, I mean, I could be completely wrong.
Yeah.
This is being recorded. We'll look back in a few years' time, just like we did with Game Pass, and I was right with that. But we'll look down in a few years' time, and maybe I'm completely wrong, and Final Fantasy VII's on Xbox, and pig's flight. But for now, I'm pretty confident in saying I don't think that will be the case.
All right. And so before we do wrap up the show, because we've been going for a little bit now,
Hmm.
I've got one question to pose to you, and this is due to the Xbox showcase that's coming in a couple of weeks' time. What is one thing that you think will be announced or happen at that show? Just one
Hmm.
idea, because there's especially with what's happening, and we've already spoken head to toe about what's happening with Xbox, what we think would happen with Xbox, what we would do, and that sort of stuff. I think it's June 9th, I think it is, or around that time frame. They've got their showcase. What do you reckon, in order to win people over, what is one thing that you reckon we'll see?
I think we'll see something Gears related. I think there's been rumors of a Gears collection for the Marcus Phoenix collection for
Oh,
years.
they were talking about that for years.
I think the time is right though, to see something Gears related. Would we see something Fallout related? Given the a
Well,
remake or a
we
remaster
just
or
had the
something,
update for Fallout 4. I like unless you have an update for New Vegas or they're
or a
announcing New
remake
Vegas
or
2 or yeah.
yeah, yeah. But I think Xbox, and that's the thing. We've spoken a lot of negative about Xbox. They've actually got a really exciting lineup. Like I am so pumped for Indiana Jones. Like I love machine games. I think they're one of the better developers that Microsoft's purchased. So I think in terms of what they've got coming, super exciting. They've got games coming at the wazoo. Like this year alone, you're going to get Hellblade, you're going to get Indiana Jones, you're going to get Call of Duty. You got the Starfield big update. So I think there's a lot of things to be excited about. I would, if I was to say anything in terms of what would excite me, maybe just clear. It's hard. They're going to balance announcing new stuff, but then also balancing everything they've announced that isn't out. Maybe
Setting
just dial it back a little bit in terms of maybe have one or two big new announcements, but let's start seeing everything that has been announced. Let's see Fable.
That's
Let's see,
that's going to be my one actually. I have some sort of feeling that I know that they were talking about. I think Fable was next year, but I've got a sneaking suspicion that they might announce it for later this year.
they've got a pretty stacked year already.
Well, what
Um,
else do they have coming later this year?
Besides Indiana Jones, Call of Duty, there is another. I'm sure there's something
Forza
else. I think
Motorsport.
I think Avowed was scheduled for this year, which I actually don't think will happen. But I still think there's one other game coming this year. Let me double check while you keep talking.
No, that's okay. Because I feel like if you want to, like, if you're Xbox right now and you've got your big announcements in your E3 window, as we like to call it, around June, you want to not like we've had the hope. We've been asking for, okay, show us the games, especially recently where we've had games like Redfall come out, which kind of flopped a little bit, and now you've got places like Tango closing down as well as Arcane. You know, do we need to go back into that cycle of the hope again? Do we need to see a little bit of Fable? Do we need to get an idea about Avowed? Are they going to talk about a new Fallout? Are we going to see anything else to do with Elder Scrolls 6 now that we know that they are working on it? Like, do we want to go along that hype train one more time, or are you going to try and talk about the here and now over the next 6 months? Which I'm not sure about you, but I don't like. We've had Halo and we had Starfield as the last two major big ones, and neither of them made the impact that they would have liked to have made. So I'm I'm looking at what games are kind of rumored and all that sort of stuff. I'm not seeing any sort of games that are going to have an impact. So are they going to focus more on the service? Are they going to focus on Game Pass? Is it going to be something extra there? Like they've already taken away the Game Pass rewards where
Mm.
even if you log in for a day or you get an achievement on a new game or play a Game Pass game, you get like points and that goes towards your Microsoft points. I know they're redoing that, but what are they actually going to hang their hat on and say, okay, well, this is the big announcement that we want to make. We want to get in early, set expectations, and get people excited for the second half of the year.
Yeah, I think there's a few like Aria History Untold, which I believe is a PC exclusive. I think Flight Simulator's rumored, and again Indiana Jones, Call of Duty. So that kind of September, October, November, December is pretty stacked. Avowed's supposedly supposed to be in there. I don't see that. That game was I think in alpha when they
Yeah.
showed it last. So I don't think that's coming out this year. So they've got a lot. Where they can win some fanfare as well as all the old Call of Duty games are now on Game Pass. All the old Crash Bandicoots and Spyros and all Tony Hawk, all that stuff's coming to Game Pass. So again, I think for all the negative stuff that may be perceived from this episode, I am more excited about Xbox now than I've ever been. And it's because I think they've actually got a path forward to success here. Let's see it play out. Hellblade 2 will be, I think, well received critical darling. But the reality is it isn't going to sell. So we need these games to be played elsewhere. And that isn't a dig,
So,
just so we can see Ninja Theory continue. Because they're a great studio and I want to play games from them.
so what's their killer app? Because I don't think they're going to spend 15 minutes talking about how Sea of Thieves has come to PlayStation.
No, I actually don't think they'll mention PlayStation. I think it'd be wild if they spoke about PlayStation, even if games were coming to PlayStation. What they might do, and this is what a lot of the time does happen, they just announce it, has the Xbox splash screen, and then maybe in the press release after the fact, it
Yeah.
notes in there that this game's also coming to Switch and PlayStation. But I don't think they have mentioned the word PlayStation. They could. I mean, they
No, they
could,
wouldn't. They wouldn't.
but that would be
It's
pretty.
a press release. It's 100% a press release if there's any game going to another platform. What they're not going to label Nintendo Switch or anything like that. They'll just say PC and our Xbox gamers or some generic thing like that because
Yeah,
that's what
but
Phil
I think if
Spencer
they
does.
showed Fable and Perfect Dark and get people hyped for those two things, I think that's enough.
Perfect
And
Dark
then,
probably like out of all the games that are upcoming, I honestly think Perfect Dark's probably the one with the most hype. I think Fable's kind of lost it a little bit after the rise and fall of Fable Legends that has become a legend unto of itself. But like even your Redfall didn't do that well like at all. Um, all the previous ones like Starfield and that Halo like that none have been that big you know, buy Game Pass,
everyone's
buy
talking about it.
Xbox. We're talking about it. The last
Mm.
one was, the last big game that most people have had a massive say on was Baldur's Gate 3, and that didn't even release on Xbox at launch.
Yeah, yeah. That's the thing. It's been like there's the meme of Sideshow Bob walking into the rakes continuously. It's been a lot of that, and I just want to be very clear. Like I think a lot of the moves Microsoft made, as much as I criticize the acquisitions and Game Pass and all that,
Consolidation.
they were necessary for their survival and necessary for them to, I guess, have a chance. But the world has changed. Let's just embrace it. Let's rip the band-aid on. Let's see some games. Let's play some games, get excited. And like I said, we're here to play games.
Game Pass Ultimate now includes Disney Plus.
Yeah, now includes your haircut. It gives
Yeah.
you a credit to go get a haircut.
Well, you've heard how like the Comcast is doing a bundle of Netflix and I think Hulu and a couple of others. Like they're doing subscription-based bundles now.
Yeah,
Um, I wouldn't be
Sony's doing it
surprised.
too with their movies, right? And Crunchyroll and all that, like in other markets. Like there's look, I know we're wrapping up.
Yeah.
Where you can see a lot of change happen, Game Pass is going to go up in price because it's the nature of subscription services.
Yes.
And I do like your idea of Ultimate being where the games launch day and date and then they trickle down. The issue, I guess, with that is the uproar from everyone that's the 20 million that are subscribed or whatever that number looks like. They're going to have to deal with that. The other option, if they can't do that, is lower the boundary of the entry point. Maybe you do have a lower tier that has ads and all these different things to monetize it.
Oh,
But
don't talk about ads in video games just yet.
I know, but that's the world we do live in, right? So as a Game Pass fan, if I was a fan of Game Pass, if I found out these games were going elsewhere to support those games continually being in Game Pass and justifying it, who cares that someone on PlayStation's paying $70 for it? If that sale is going to help justify the fact that I get to continue to pay a subscription to play games and that's the way I want to consume them, who cares?
Yeah,
Move on.
well, that's kind of my thinking. Like, I, which funnily enough, I kind of share the at least what Phil Spencer says, where it doesn't matter about where you play the games. It's about being able to play the games. And yeah, you can have them exclusive on a particular platform. Fair enough. If you want to play it on that platform. I get that. Like, you're not going to order a Big Mac from KFC. But in the grand scheme of it, the more people you get your game in front of, the more likely you're probably going to get that sort of support. And if they choose to play that through a subscription based service because that meets their needs, or if it's buying it outright on another platform or the same platform, so be it. It's whatever works for the consumer, whatever works for the gamer. And most of the time, especially when Christmas comes around, parents aren't buying Game Pass subscriptions, they're buying games for their kids. They're buying the individual titles because it's easier to do that. Yeah, it'll get to the stage where you do the Game Pass because it's like a gift card. You want to make them happy somehow. But I think it's all about how you want to buy it and how you want to play it. So like I play Game Pass. I've got PlayStation Plus, sure, but I don't really care if a game only comes out on the Switch. I'll buy it on Switch to play it. If I know it's going to come out on Game Pass and it's going to come out on PC, well, I've got Game Pass. I'll just play it on that. Like,
Yeah.
I don't
And
I
the
don't
last thing I'll
mind.
say before we wrap up, the same whingy people are on PlayStation 2.
Oh yeah,
Exactly. About who cares if someone's playing it on PC? Like that again, it goes back to the point the market's changed. Who cares? Let's just play the games and enjoy it.
you just want Sly Cooper. We get it.
When I saw those rumors being debunked, I'm like, you bastards.
Oh, that's a pain point for you. No, that's all right.
Mm.
Well, we will wrap it up there. So that is our first episode here on YouTube for 2024. Remember that if you do want to catch any other information, you can always find us here on our YouTube, Busy Playing Something podcast. Otherwise, you can find us on X. You can find us at Holy DePrawn as well, and at Joshua LaRosa. You can find us on X or Twitter or whatever. I don't like calling it my X.
Yeah, no, it doesn't sound right
I'm
as
not a
well. And
no.
yeah, and this will also be available on podcast feeds as well. So just again look up Busy Playing Something podcast, and we will be there on podcast feeds. See, we come to you. We're not going to restrict it to one platform.
Yeah, fancy that. It's almost like you can, take in this content whichever way you choose,
Yeah,
whether that's through Spotify Premium or through YouTube Premium or through any other premium. No?
subscriptions.
Yeah, subscriptions. Yeah, woo. We're part of that day and age. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. I've been Sean. We've also had Josh, and we will see you next week.
Stay sexy.
Yeah.